Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is part 2 of Master of Reality. Okay, and believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, all right, so here we go. Okay, and so before we begin with the history of spectroscopy, let's have a quick recap first, and how all of this started with looking at pictures of the sun, which led to looking at pictures of space and me thinking, how this isn't what space looks like, and what process did they use to get these images, which led to spectroscopy, which led to the hydrogen wave function chart, which led to connecting spectroscopy and hydrogen wave function to the somatic signatures on the church machines, making that connection with hydrogen now. And who could have been using these church machines, which led to Gnosticism and the demiurge and the archons, and which led back to spectroscopy, and how spectroscopy is pretty much like, or could be, like the physical representation of Gnosticism. Or the study of it, rather, the actual physical study of Gnosticism. Something like that, right? That's kind of where this is headed, right? And so the history of spectroscopy begins in the 17th century with new designs in optics, specifically prisms, which enabled systematic observations of the solar spectrum. The sun's light goes in through the glass and comes out the rainbow of colors. They study these colors, and they correlate them to the elements and so forth. And ever since then, spectroscopy has played and continues to play a significant role in chemistry, physics, and astronomy, which are essentially like the building blocks of our physical realm. And though here it says in the origins and experimental development, right, the Romans were already familiar with the ability of a prism to generate a rainbow of colors. Of course they were. They were the Romans. It's as though, while Newton is traditionally regarded as the founder of spectroscopy, he was not the first man of science who studied and reported on the solar spectrum. The works of these gentlemen here predate Newton's optic experiments of 1666 to 1672, which happens to also be, of course, 6 years. His optics experiments lasted 6 years, started in 1666. Yeah. Right? And so you look at these gentlemen, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go, again, Falcon's Maze, right through the first, right? And here's Athanasius Kircher. And when I first looked at it, I was like, oh my God, that's the dude's landlord from The Big Lebowski.
Dude.
Hey, Marty.
Dude,
Absolutely. Unbelievable how much he looks like that actor whose name is Jack Keller. I couldn't believe it. But right up front it says that he's a Jesuit. 1602 to 1680, right? Jesuit scholar, polymath, 40 major works. And so now I'm already like, this is Baal to Rome stuff. This is what I'm going to be looking at in Baal to Rome. So I'm not going to go into him now. So I go through all of this guy to the end. And so I get to this list of Jesuit scientists, right? And the first name on the list is Nicholas Copernicus, of course, who's responsible for heliocentrism. And now, as I was saying, all of this is going to be coming up in Baal to Rome. I'm going to be studying this deeply. But if, the Jesuits are involved in the creation of the science of spectroscopy, now that adds a whole new interesting level into the fake space angle. And so before I can move this story forward the way it needs to, I need to talk a little bit about our beliefs, why we believe things, what is our reality, that kind of thing. How do we know things? how do we know anything? And so what is our reality? Reality is the sum or aggregate of all that is real or existent, as opposed to that which is only imaginary. I think only imaginary, like the celestial equator is only imaginary. That's not real. So what reality is, all that is real, that all that we can experience with our senses, that's reality. Things that we can touch and smell and see, and but it's also, right, in a physical sense, is the totality of the universe. Known and unknown. Unknown things can be real. Right? So when you put that in the context of science, and chemistry and physics are like the building blocks of our physical reality, and spectroscopy is the tool that they use to bring astronomy into our physical reality, right? So it's not just equations anymore, right? It's not just numbers on paper or observations of things that can't be observed up close. Why do we believe what science tells us, or what spectroscopy tells us about astronomy and making astronomy part of our physical reality? Right? Why do we believe that? What is belief? Belief is the acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. It's trust, faith, or confidence in someone or something. So we believe that because we put trust in our scientists, right? Because our scientists know things. What is knowledge? Knowledge is acquired. It's facts or information, skills acquired by a person through experience or education, right? Theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. Right? It's awareness or familiarity gained by experience of a fact or situation. So we know things because we're taught them, and we believe them because we trust the sources who teach them to us. And so why do we believe that the scientific techniques of spectroscopy, which are used in chemistry and physics, can explain and create a physical reality for astronomy? Because we trust the sources where we're getting this information from. And so the question I ask, and the question that really drives my quest for knowledge, is that why do we? Should we? Who are they? Who is teaching us this, right? And so it's said that the history of spectroscopy begins in the 17th century. But when I looked up in physics, it said that it was a part of something called the scientific revolution, and that before the 17th century, science was part of a natural philosophy. But after the scientific revolution, it becomes industrialized. And so who's responsible for the scientific revolution? Right? And in the spectroscopy arena, it lists these gentlemen. So now why do we trust this? And so I just wanted to take a look at these guys and sort of like where they went to school and stuff, right? And so we have Kircher here, Monty. He went to Roman College, which was a Jesuit college in Rome. And like I said, this guy's absolutely amazing. Read about him. He took over for Kepler. You want to talk about creating an agenda behind heliocentrism. And that's where this is going. All right, the next on the list, and all of these guys I'm going to get deeper into in Baltimore. I hate to sound like a broken record, but he went to Charles University, which is another major Jesuit university. And this was also one of the oldest universities in Europe. And that's a connection that runs a thread through all of these guys. All of these guys go to some of the oldest universities. Robert Boyle here, founder of the Royal Society. He went to Eton College. And he founded 1440. All right, Francesco Maria Grimaldi. Bologna, the first college, as I'm going to say. So these guys are all coming out of these oldest universities. And what are the oldest universities? So like, where does all of this knowledge come from that we have? That's, it all comes from the universities, because like our education, everything that we know, and this applies to history, science, politics, however you want to look at it. Everything we know is like in a pyramid scheme. And so in terms of like our history and our understanding of science, it goes back to these oldest universities and works its way down to the modern ones. Right? And so And so this is kind of like what I'm talking about. It says, right, from the early modern period onwards, the university gradually spread from the medieval Latin West across the globe, eventually replacing all other higher learning institutions. Replacing all other. Who's responsible for these universities? Right? And this trickle down of knowledge. Right? And in the end, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but so all of these universities have origins either through the church or through the crown. And so all of our scientific revolution guys are coming out of these universities. So let's take a look at the scientific revolution real quick. And so it says here that the scientific revolution was a series of events that marked the emergence of modern science during the early modern period, when developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, including human anatomy and chemistry, transformed the views of society about nature. To me, especially using the university system and the idea of the scientific revolution, it's not the transformations of the views of society about nature is the goal of the university system and the development of these physical sciences to remove man from nature, right? And it says that the scientific revolution, it's debated, but it begins essentially with the publication of Copernicus' Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres in 1543. All right, and it ends. They have 50 years apart, right? It either ends with Galileo's dialogue concerning the two chief world systems or Newton's 1687 Principia, right? But the idea of a scientific revolution happening at all over an extended period emerges in the 18th century through the work of this Jean Sylvain Bailly. Well, let's look where Jean Sylvain Bailly went, shall we? He went to the Academy of Sciences, which was founded in 1666. Right? So, this whole concept of a scientific revolution presented to the public comes about like 100 years or more after it supposedly had taken place. And it seems to have an agenda, transforming the views of society about nature. And one of the ideas that they want to transform is the cosmology. What people believe about the earth and their place in it. Right? And so, why would they want to do that? What's the goal? Because all of these, and like the publication of the revolutions of the heavenly spheres and Galileo's work and all this stuff, comes out of church institutions. I mean, it's church sanctioned, because at a time when people are being killed for voicing views and opinions that are anti-church, these guys are running amok in God's garden. Right? And the church is just okay with it. Why is that? I mean, and they put stories in there like Galileo's imprisonment and whatnot, but he's still allowed to publish and stuff. And I'm going to get all of this I'm going to be getting deeper into this. I want to move this story ahead. When I think, what's going on in the church at this time that they would allow this sort of thing to happen? Because I know what was going on in England at the time, and that was the English Civil War, which is when Protestantism took over the government, right? And it had the reduction and marginalization of Catholicism, like they became the persecuted, the Catholic state, right? And so now I'm looking at this timeline. This is right at the time of the scientific revolution, and made me think about what is Protestantism. And Protestantism, to me, is just the illusion of choice created by the Catholic Church, right? Because they'd been in control, for 1,000 years at this point, right? And when you look at the timeline for Reformation and the scientific revolution and all this stuff is sort of happening right at the same time, historically speaking, right? Even though we have the early 1500s here, and then 100 years later, there's a quick jump, the scientific revolution starts. And so the narrative presents it like perhaps the rise of the Jesuits and the scientific revolution comes as a response to Catholic control and the Holy Roman Empire. But I'm thinking it's not a response to, it's the controlled opposition, the illusion of choice, right? And I even think about it, perhaps the Jesuits were actually around first, and the Reformation was their tool, right? Because the Catholic Church is unveiling its renaissance, its rebirth around this time, because that's essentially what Renaissance means. It means rebirth. And they're presenting all these options. You know, we're coming out of the Dark Ages, all these alleged plagues and wars are kind of ending, and the Crusades are over. So that's what I'm thinking. And now if you're the Catholic Church and you're trying to create the illusion of choice, and what you've presented so far in your history is the idea of a trinity, well, then you need to make a trinity of choices or create an illusion of one. Right? Because you have your trinity, your Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And so with your Catholic Church, you have like your Father, and then after the Reformation, you have the Son, and now you need your Holy Ghost. And what's your Holy Ghost? But the scientific revolution, science and spectroscopy, more illusion of choice. And they've used the Reformation and the Society of Jesus and its universities and schools to present their spectroscopy, their ghost, and the Holy Ghost of science and spectroscopy. And it all comes out of this period of the mid-1600s, right? And then, as I was saying, it wasn't even another 100 years before, it's even sort of tied together. Right? So they had time to organize this stuff and time to get it done. Right? And they present their scientific revolution, which is transforming the views of society about nature. As I tried to say, removing mankind from nature and God. Right? And that it's industrialized. They make profit. And I hope this is kind of making sense, because here, scientific revolution traditionally assumed to start with the Copernican Revolution, 1543, all right, complete with Newton's publication of the Principia, as I said. It says, but much of the change of the attitude came from Francis Bacon, whose confident and emphatic announcement in the modern progress of science inspired the creation of scientific societies such as the Royal Society. The formation of the Royal Society right at the height of the scientific revolution. It's a learned society, and the United Kingdom's National Academy of Sciences, founded 28 November 1660, right? And it was granted a royal charter by King Charles II. And so now science is becoming incorporated. And so I have the royal charter. This is a translation of it, so I'm assuming then perhaps that the original charter was written in Latin, right? I don't know. But this is the first charter granted to the President, Council, and Fellows of the Royal Society of London by King Charles II, A.D. 1662. I'm only going to read the first part here. So King Charles II, by the grace of God, King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith and company, I guess, to all to whom these present letters shall come, greeting. And I like this is by the grace of God, King of England. God is the King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland. And Charles is a defender of the faith. We have long and who's we? We have long and fully resolved ourselves to extend not only the boundaries of the empire, but also the very arts and sciences. I don't know, I could take that to me, to extend the boundaries of the empire, conquest, ownership of larger amounts of land, right, of the world, right? But also the arts and sciences. The boundaries of the empire to include the arts and sciences. Right? They're incorporating. They have their corporate name here now, the Royal Society, and they elect their presidents and councils and fellows, and it talks a little bit about the rights that they have here, right? So The President, Council, and Fellows of the Royal Society aforesaid may and shall be in all future times persons able and capable in law to have, acquire, receive, and possess lands and tenements, meadows, feedings, pastures, liberties, privileges, franchises, jurisdictions, and hereditaments whatsoever to themselves and their successors in fee and perpetuity for the term of life, lives, or years, or otherwise in whatsoever manner, and also goods and chattels, and all other things of whatsoever kind, nature, sort, or quality that may be, and also to give, grant, demise, and assign the same lands, tenements, and hereditaments, and goods and chattels, and to do and execute all acts and things necessary of and concerning the same by the name aforesaid. I mean, it's just unbelievable the language they put in here, to underscore the power that the Royal Society now has, and that power is answerable only to the Crown by its charter. And so now, for the first time, we have the ownership of the results of scientific endeavors. And so once there's ownership, there needs to be profits. And now if again, I don't think this Protestant Revolution, it's all the same, right? They're all looking for ways to profit. The Catholic Church was, right? And so it creates these illusions of choice, right? And one of the illusions of choice that they're going with is this heliocentric model put forth because it creates their trinity of their Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, spectroscopy. And they need to find ways to profit on it, and to prey on the people that they're trying to control. And so I'm going to wrap it up here, and we're going to continue with the history of spectroscopy and how they use it to control what we think about our universe. So I'm going to edit this one down, see if it makes any sense. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. And until the next one, cheers.